Prime Minister, I'm wondering how you see this window of time of trade talks given the new 30-day deadline. Do you think that this is a meaningful opportunity to approach some sort of end game with the United States, or is it just another pressure tactic from the Trump administration?
It's both. I mean, that's the direct answer. We've seen a series of trade negotiations that the U.S. has undertaken, and normally there's a deadline. Normally there's an outsized tariff associated with that deadline. First observation. The second thing is that I would say that in our interactions this week with various levels of the U.S. administration, mine with the President, Minister LeBlanc, with his counterpart, Madame Charette, with hers, other officials, that there's a level of engagement and a breadth of engagement that reflects the seriousness of the trade relationship and the breadth of the issues. So it creates an opportunity. Now, and I'm going to hand back to you, Kate, but I'll just say that First Ministers, Premiers, and myself, we've had a series of conversations on this, on what it means, what our priorities are, where we go from here. And I will say, give you two observations from that. One, we all recognize that the most important thing we can do is to continue to build this economy strong and unite this economy. That's job one. That immediate benefits for Canadians, and that is what we can control. And the second is to be united with respect to our strategy, our negotiating strategy, and our objectives. And part of that unity is recognizing that there isn't a series of little trade issues, they're broad trade issues. All of them have to be part of a comprehensive agreement.
You said this morning that all these governments would do whatever it takes to defend and support our families, our business, et cetera. And I'd like to hear after 3 hours of meeting, some specifics. Counter tariffs are a possibility, and so on, if you could provide some specifics. And then two, let's say you get this deal, CUSMA 2 with the President of the United States. You're going to have to convince a lot of Canadians skeptical of the trustworthiness of the President that no, this time he means it. He'll keep his word this time on CUSMA 2. How will you explain that the President can be trusted when he signs a document with your name on it? Thank you.
Well, first, in terms of doing whatever it takes, there's multiple aspects of that. First, and I won't repeat the whole element of, but it's building the economy and support. Like that's fundamental. It's diversifying our trade relations, is all that. Secondly, it is helping those sectors that are affected directly by the tariffs with financial support, supporting their workers, reorienting demand for some of their products where that's possible, providing some level of trade protection, if necessary, remissions, other aspects. So there's a variety of things, and we're working through that. We've been doing this and supporting literally tens of thousands of jobs in the 232 sectors, the strategic sectors, steel, aluminum, automobiles, and others, and we'll continue to do that with other sectors that are affected. The third is responding. If these tariffs or other measures come into force, and there's a full range of things that we can do in that regard. We don't need to respond in advance. In fact, I think it would be counterproductive at this stage to respond in advance. But it's important to know what your options are, to have worked it through, to have shared as it affects certain provinces or they have perspectives directly, and be united in that response. And I would say, and Premiers obviously speak for themselves, we are united in direction and objective and purpose and seriousness about the response. We are going to support Canadian families, workers, businesses, full stop. Now, to the second part of your question, first, I have to be convinced, we have to be convinced, the team has to be convinced, the Premiers have to be convinced that an agreement is worth the paper it's written on, and I think at the core of that is that the agreement recognizes the benefits, the very, very many benefits that trade with Canada brings, not just to Canadians, but to Americans. I mean, it's their self-interest. But it has to recognize, it has to be aligned, has to have provisions that reinforce, of course. But we will know when we see it. And I would say, we go in from Missouri, to use an American expression, on this, with wide eyes, lots of options, rolling up our sleeves, doing the work, but we're working on behalf of Canadians, we'll know it when we see it. And final point, there are other things we could have done in the intervening time that we didn't do in agreements, perhaps because of the nature of your question.
In the last 24 hours, the Jameson Greer has come out with saying the U.S. wants to pursue interim agreements with Canada and Mexico, and they've been pursuing negotiations separately, but kind of divide and conquer tactic, shall we say. And so I'm curious about your ongoing positivity that we'll get a comprehensive agreement and perhaps even a trilateral one.
Okay, there's a few aspects of that. First, what Secretary Greer and his colleagues in the U.S. have indicated, including in the last 24 hours, is an intention, I can't remember exactly the language he uses, but that the foundation of what he would call USMCA remains intact. So he has a different metaphor for it, but effectively that the interim agreements would be consistent with the structure of USMCA. And you'd have bilateral that reflect the differences in our economy and the differences in some of the trade issues between us. It's a sensible approach. So first off, that's their approach. Now, secondly, in terms of, and let me say that the Mexicans have phones, we have phones. We travel to Mexico, they come here, we talk to them. We're not uninformed. We know what's going on. And we have very good and deepening ties with Mexico. And I'm going to take this opportunity to thank President Sheinbaum and the Mexican people for sending 200 firefighters to help us with our fires here. That's what friends do when you have crisis and fires. Right? We do the same with the Mexicans, we do with the South Africans, the Australians, and others, but this is our time of need, and Mexico is stepping up. The third thing is, you imputed something in what I said, which is, you said my positivity about getting a compromise. I didn't say that. I said that's what we want. That's what we're working towards. We have many strengths and assets. We're going to negotiate hard for that. And the reason we haven't signed a partial deal is because we're focused on those sectors. So that's where we are. And I guess let me make two final points just with respect to trade for the avoidance of doubt. The first is that the United States is due today, tomorrow, probably tomorrow, I guess, but certainly in the next few days, to come back on their 301 trade process. Addresses 60 countries, replaces what are called IEEPA tariffs, if you followed that, the 128 tariffs, and there's different justification, et cetera. I'm sure you're familiar with it. So they will make an announcement on that. We'll see what the announcement actually is, but that will not be, well, you can judge it at the time, it will not be news. We had a discussion. It will be, look, it's news, but it's not unexpected what's happening there. Okay, it's part of the bigger puzzle. The second thing is that it is possible and entirely consistent with what Ambassador Greer said, is that there is an agreement with Canada, agreement with Mexico. I'm not giving positivity or negativity. I'm just telling you the process that addresses some of these bigger issues. But there is also a series of, and I don't want to downplay them, but technical issues with related, or trade irritants, as the Americans would call them, with respect to CUSMA. And that process extends towards the end of the year, and there are other possibilities as well.